could now be guilty of criminal conspiracy, Aaron.
All right, NBC's Ken Delanian for us breaking it down this afternoon. Ken, thank you.
Good to be with you. Thanks.
Let's bring in Naveed Jamali, now MSNBC contributor, former FBI double agent, and author of the book How to Catch a Russian Spy, and Benjamin Wittes, MSNBC legal analyst, senior fellow in governance studies at the Brookings Institution, and editor-in-chief of the institution's national security blog, Lawfare. Naveed, I'll start with you. As we look at this indictment, there are details going back to 2014. We know that the New York Times was reporting on this group in the summer of 2015. How did we not catch a spy here? What explains not seeing charges in this earlier, doing something more to stop what these folks are alleged to have done going into the 2016 election?
That's a great question. You know, I think looking at the indictment, one of the things that Americans should take away from this is the sophistication that not just the Russians have, but the ability of our intelligence community to frankly keep tabs on this. And, you know, the fact is that when it comes to this type of activity, it's not necessarily a legal action. That is to say, it's not law enforcement action, rather. It's a counterintelligence operation. And when it comes to counterintelligence, one of the things that you want to do, Aaron, is just sort of sit and watch. You're waiting for that perfect time. And, you know, part of this is when you get one piece of that network, you want to find the larger network. So perhaps the answer to the question here is that these people are clearly under surveillance, which is why we have things like emails between some of them going back to their families and things like that. But clearly they were under surveillance, and there was a point, I think that's a fair question, why didn't they act, and why wasn't something done sooner?
And Benjamin, while we were paying attention to what was coming out of this indictment, Robert Mueller also surprised us with some new allegations against Paul Manafort last night. Is there any connection in the timing here? Why do these in the same day?
Well, so I suspect they are probably not importantly connected. You know, once a case is in litigation, what determines things like new allegations will tend to be the timetable of the litigation itself. That said, I mean, Mueller clearly did a lot of business yesterday, right? And you know, there was also a plea deal with somebody sort of tangentially related to the larger Russia indictment. So, look, I mean, I think, you know, the broad point here is that this is a very active investigation across a number of fronts. And so when the White House releases tweets or statements that have this sort of implication that, okay, we've now indicted the Russians, we can all go home because there's no collusion, there really is a sort of measure of self-delusion in that, as well as a measure of spin, or sort of a dominant measure of spin for the benefit of the public or the negative benefit of the public. And really, we should understand this as a very active investigation that's pursuing a lot of things, most of which we probably don't have visibility into right now.
Naveed, this indictment doesn't charge the Russian government. It doesn't name any Americans, doesn't charge them with any crimes. Is it credible to think that this group was operating in isolation? There was so much depth, it seems, to what they were doing, according to this indictment. Is it possible that Vladimir Putin's hands are not in this in some way?
Absolutely not. And it's also absolutely not possible that there are not Americans that were not involved in this. Look, I spent 3 years sitting down with Russian intelligence officers in a counterintelligence operation talking to them. And I can tell you unequivocally that while the Russians have the intent to cause us harm, they don't necessarily have the cultural and institutional knowledge about sort of the infrastructure of our country to do so without the help of Americans. So this is basically, this indictment with these 13 Russians is essentially the groundwork, the framing, if you will, for what's going to happen next. And I am almost positive that we will learn of Americans that were not unwitting assets, but rather had to have been involved. The targeting, the information that the Russians collected came in part to some degree, I am sure, from Americans.
And Benjamin, I want to dig a little bit into something you alluded to. The President Trump, the White House are really resolute that this indictment proves there was no collusion. We know, though, that the indictment cites at least 3 Trump campaign officials who were contacted by Russians as a part of this scheme. What do you read into that? What does that tell us?
Well, so look, I mean, I think I take the indictment at its word that the individuals that it names were unwitting. The word unwitting is actually an exculpatory statement by the prosecutor here. And I think it's reasonable to expect that they are not going to accuse those 3 individuals of witting involvement in this particular conspiracy. That said, I completely agree that it is too early to suggest that this is a vindication of the Trump campaign generally from the idea that somebody there may have assisted or collaborated with or engaged with or conspired with, or you might say colluded with these operations. This indictment is a discussion or a description of the activity with which one would have colluded if one were colluding. And so it simply doesn't answer the question, and that's intentional. It's leaving that question for a different day.
Naveed, you know firsthand, from firsthand experience, how Russian operatives interact with Americans. Do you think that there would have been any clues here, or is it likely that all of the Americans contacted by this group were totally unaware of who they were dealing with?
No, I think, look, again, this is from my personal experience. There's a very clear line. Someone might approach you, and they might do so in sort of an innocuous, above-board manner, and you know, purchasing Facebook ads, you know, to the same manner someone who hires a taxi driver to drive them to the airport. That's not necessarily an unwitting asset. There's a point, though, in the discussion when someone has approached you where it is very clear who they are and what they are after. So I go back with Benjamin. This is the first shot in a salvo of future shots to come, and I think we're going to learn that absolutely there are Americans who were aware of what they were doing, and this, you know, look, just to bottom line this, when I think about Russia, there's just simply no way that the targeting data, the way that the sophistication that they ran this operation, that they would have had the institutional knowledge to do this without the help of people who understood our election system. And to that, I have to believe that they targeted U.S. persons, and someone out there helped them.
So another way to think about that is just to think about how narrow the subject matter of this indictment is.
That's right.
This is not an indictment about the collaboration between the Russians and the Trump campaign, if such a thing took place. It's not even an indictment about the entirety of the picture on the Russian side. It is not about hacking, for example, and it's actually not about government activity. It's about the activities of this private sector entity run by a friend of Putin's. So this, and only on the social media side. So this is an indictment that deals with Russian private sector social media influence war, information war activity, and nothing else. And so I think, you know, to look at that and claim, as the president does, that it shows that there wasn't collusion, you know, it also doesn't say anything about the Manson murders, right? I mean, there's a lot of subjects that this indictment doesn't talk about.
All right, good point there, gentlemen. I trust we'll be continuing this conversation, part 2, part 3, maybe in the not too distant future. Naveed Jamali, Benjamin Wittes, thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
Much more on the Russia investigation ahead, and we're also following